friends. Thank you for joining me for this and a series of programs designed to look at our government. I plan to introduce to you the people involved in our government and go into the procedures necessary for its operation. My name is Dan Armin. I'm the host of I Want to Know, and I would like to welcome our esteemed Finance Director, Anthony Esposito. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Dan.
Why don't you just start by telling me a little bit about yourself, where you grew up?
I grew up in Northford. In fact, my parents live in the same house that I grew up in still. I was fortunate enough to go through the North Branford School District, William Douglas School, Stanley T. Williams School. I was in the first class that went through all 4 years at Northford Intermediate School, grades 5 through 8. Graduated from North Branford High School in 1979.
Okay.
I went to Quinnipiac, got a bachelor's degree in accounting in 1983, and a master's degree in accounting from the University of New Haven in 1999.
I know you're involved with the fire department in some degree, right?
Yes.
What do you do for the fire?
Currently, I hold the title of Deputy Chief.
Okay.
I started in the fire department in 1975. When I was 14, Company 2, the station in the center of Northford, had just started up an explorer post. We called them junior fire department back then, junior firemen. And at the same time, if you recall, back in the mid-'70s, there was a show called Emergency that was on TV.
Yeah, I sure do.
Johnny and Roy, we all wanted to be Johnny and Roy, and the firefighter, saved the world, the whole thing. That coupled with the fact that a couple of my neighbors were volunteer firemen, and when I was at their house, if a tone would go off or I'd see them run out to the car and take off, I thought it was pretty exciting. So when the opportunity arose when I was 14 in 1975, I joined the junior fire department in Company 2. And then at 18, I was voted into the adult membership and then held various positions. Since then, administratively, I was secretary of Company 2. I was elected to the Board of Fire Commissioners when it was an election. When I was 22 years old, and then was chairman for several years. I was involved in the team that started the ambulance company in the mid-'80s, and was on to be the first captain of the ambulance company.
So we didn't have an ambulance company beforehand?
That's correct. We relied on outside entities to provide ambulance service. I guess back in the mutual aid.
Okay.
Back in the day, I guess towards the 40s, there might have been an ambulance in town previously. There was also in the old Company 2 firehouse a private company called Mayfair Ambulance.
Oh.
Used to house an ambulance in town in the center of Northford. Logistically, they just got bought out by what became AMR, bought a series of the commercial ambulance companies over time. And what was happening basically was I'd gotten my EMT in 1982. We'd get to someone's house relatively quickly with the fire department, as we do today. Then we'd have to wait.
You still have to wait for an ambulance.
Exactly. It was upwards, an average at the time, there was like 19 minutes, town-wide average.
That's the difference between life and death.
Exactly. So as you're sitting there taking care of a family member, and they'd be asking, what are you doing for my mother, father, sister, brother, whatever the case.
You say we're waiting for an ambulance.
So again, we put a team together in the mid-'80s, and we petitioned the town council, the fire commission, and most importantly, the citizenry of North Branford. A huge number came out and received EMT training. In fact, the trainer of that initial class was Bill Seward at the time.
Oh, okay.
When in his prior career in New Haven, he was one of the EMS instructors that taught our first class of EMTs. And then became district chief in '95, and then that kind of position morphed into deputy chief when there was reorganization in the early 2000s, mid-2000s.
Okay.
That's where I hold today.
When you had a choice between going into finance versus being a firefighter professionally, why did you decide to go into finance?
Well, it's actually an interesting story. Throughout my high school career, I was gearing towards a medical career. I had taken the biology, human anatomy, physics, the whole 9-yard chemistry. And in fact, I was accepted to Quinnipiac in the medical technology program. And I needed a half-year course my senior year in high school. And there was a teacher at the time, Miss Taishi, never forget her. I took her half-year course, Intro to Accounting, and it changed my entire life. I had to stop my application to Quinnipiac for medical technology, reapply to the business office, business school, and got into that. So that 1.5 year course, I think that's kind of why I kind of did the EMT afterwards. I had that inkling of the medical background.
You still had that drive too.
Yeah. So that 1.5 year course changed my career path into accounting. And like I mentioned, I went to Quinnipiac, got the bachelor's in accounting. And fortunately, when I got out of college in '83, I was hired by a steel company in Milford called Eastern Steel.
Okay.
Became their corporate controller. And unfortunately, in around 2000, 2001, they were bought out by a firm out of Cleveland, and all the accounting was taken out to Cleveland. At the same time, fortunately, the town was looking to create another position in the town finance office called a staff accountant. I applied for it and fortunately was hired by Frank Conley at the time. That was in '92. And then 2 years later, when the finance director retired, I became a finance director in '94, a position that I've held since that point.
Okay, so then my next question, I think, is what does a finance director do?
A little bit of everything. Quite honestly, in our town, you know, we have basically a hands-on situation where, aside from finance, I also am kind of like the pseudo technology guy in the town side. We don't have a technology department. We rely on some outside vendors, but internally, I try to handle all the things before we have to hire an outside contractor. I get involved in budgeting, audits, labor negotiations, issuing bonds for long-term projects, capital projects. Every day is different. There's no 2 days that are identical in my career. It makes for an exciting job.
Well, I bet you just never know what you're walking into.
Exactly.
Other than a packed office.
Yes.
So what would be a good next question? Because that's really, you know, you do a lot of stuff.
Right. I mean, I think it's important to note that the finance office in town, and I believe all the town employees, quite honestly, have the best interest of the residents at hand. I mean,
absolutely.
We consider ourselves, I consider myself to be the steward of the people that are paying their taxes. They are scraping together dollars to pay their taxes, and it's not up for us to squander. It's up to act responsibly and to spend it as if we're spending our own dollars, which in most cases we are. So we exercise bidding procedures. We try to get the best prices for our products. We try to do everything we can to do things for the most efficient way, which hopefully is the least costly way of doing things.
How has our budget changed over this long period of time that you've been involved with the town finances? I mean, more than 20 years.
Yeah, the budget actually, you know, what's changed a lot we've had some peaks and valleys in our debt service. When we bought the Auger property, the same time we built 2 libraries. We did
So it's probably 15 years ago, I guess?
Well, probably in the early 2000s.
Okay.
Yeah, so the early to mid 2000s, we started doing some heavy bonding. And there was a time when our debt service had creeped up. We typically average about $3 million a year in debt service. That's the payments of our principal and interest. And during that period, it kind of creeped up to closer to $5 million per year. And what we try to do is look at opportunities. In fact, we have one opportunity we're looking at now is to refinance certain debt. Just as you refinance your home mortgage.
We'll get in while rates are low.
Exactly.
And you know they're going up.
As we see opportunities for some of our existing debt that we can refinance at a lower rate and save the town some money. Again, we have one situation we're looking at now that's looking roughly about $500,000 of savings we can, you know, enjoy over the lifespan of the bond. So we keep trying to, again, work more efficiently, save dollars wherever we can, and to make the operation run smooth.
Where are we with debt load per capita in our town versus other towns?
During that period when we were at the peak, we were towards the top, quite honestly. The state has a ranking every year. The Office of Policy and Management does the municipal indicators, and we were probably in the top 5 or 6 across the state at one point.
Does that affect our rates, our bonding?
It has an impact on our ability, not so
or
much.
Or our rating, I should say?
Yeah, our rating, they look at multiple factors for the rating. They look at your financial capabilities, your financial management, the operations of the town, the population of the town, how things are run, how things are perceived. So a lot of debt load, it may weigh into your ranking, your bond rating. But the key is that you are making the payments. I mean, fortunately, there's no default. No town has ever defaulted on their bonds in Connecticut. So we struggle through it. It's just a matter of the taxpayers, you know, willing, if they wanted those capital expenditures, they had to pay for them, basically. And that's what we did. Now our debt service is coming back down. We're on a downswing now.
Which is fortunate because, you know, as we learned from Mike, the town manager, we had a breathing room where we could absorb a lot of the cuts that we sustained the past 3 years, really, from
Correct.
the state.
Correct. I mean, the state, there's no secret the state's in financial distress. And the amount of state aid that we get every year seems to go down. Last year was significant. This year, we're looking at probably about $300,000 roughly of a state aid, which
On
is
top of what we lost the past, let's
which
say,
equates to
5
about a
years.
quarter of a mil. A mill's worth about $1.2 million in our town currently. So we're $250,000 going down. Fortunately, we have also a similar drop in our debt service
Right.
obligation. So
So
it kind of
that's-
negates itself on that one. But there's always costs that increase. There's operational costs. There's whether it's fuel oil or that ebbs and flows as you see at the gas pump. It goes up and down, and concurrently that helps our budget if it goes
down,
but adversely when it goes up. So
and healthcare. What chunk of
Healthcare is
healthcare
huge.
is the town's budget even?
it's. I was walking with the town manager today. We were talking about that at the end of the day, and in the past it's averaged about $1.2 million on the town side for medical insurance, and
the board side is going to be more because they have double the amount of employees that the town side
definitely.
has.
We have about probably 70 folks on medical insurance, and they have upwards of 300 folks, all the teachers and everything
Right.
else. So it's significantly, multiples of ours. But our $1.23 million is looking to go to about $1.7 million next year based on the rates we have from Anthem currently.
So then we can also suspect that the board side is going to see the same sort of increase.
Similar.
Do we
Well,
negotiate in conjunction with each other?
Yes and no. The board has, right now the town is on what's called a PPO plan, Century Preferred, and the board over time has put most of their plans on a high deductible health plan. And not sure where the town is going to end up if we stay on the PPO plan or if we go to a high deductible plan. We're looking also at the state of Connecticut has a plan, the partnership plan it's called.
Which we have been discussing for a couple of years.
We've been discussing, and some of the hang-ups with that is it's a different carrier.
It's a change.
It's a change. It's United Healthcare versus Anthem, which everybody's had forever. So if your doctor's not in United Healthcare network, it could be a disruption.
You may have to switch.
You may have to switch, and that always causes some angst amongst people. And again, we're looking at the various cost options once we have numbers for July 1st for all three options to see what makes the most sense. Mm-hmm. Because it impacts not only the town, but also the employees who are paying a premium share. So if we can lower the overall premiums, the employees will see a benefit as well.
Do we, when we're in negotiations over rates for like healthcare or our big expenses, is that in conjunction or relative to our union negotiations as well? And then my further question would be, how does the town's fiscal outlook affect our union negotiations? Because everybody's got to be aware of how we're trending.
Sure. Well, union negotiations, we're starting the next round very shortly. We have the highway union, clerical union, the public works union, police union. And
Is that a yearly negotiation?
we try to do 3 years at a time.
Okay, so then we can all cycle in and out.
Yeah. We this past year, because of the uncertainty with the state government, we did a 1-year extension. They all basically expired on June 30 of 17. We did a 1-year extension with all of them to last
They
until June
chose
30.
not to make a change.
Exactly.
And keep what they had.
Keep it what they had, because there was so much uncertainty where the town was going to end up with medical insurance and state aid. And until the last minute, the state aid was like a bouncing
big
number.
question. In June, it was a big question.
Oh yeah, it was crazy. So you're right. The negotiation process will play into the whole medical insurance, and whether the union wants this plan or that plan. We'll look at the different cost structures and see which one makes the most sense. And again, it's always a teetering act as far as the overall cost of the negotiations, whether you raise wages or you sweeten the benefits or some combination thereof, so that everybody, end of the day, feels like they benefited from the negotiation. It's not usually a one-sided where the town typically wins or the union typically wins. We try to make sure that everybody feels that they won a little bit in the negotiation process. That makes it more successful.
Do you think the state's financial health, as far as how it affects us locally, is changing? Is it getting better or worse or staying the same?
I read like everything you read, and it's
so we really don't have an idea.
There's no end in sight. I mean, if you look at the unfunding of their pension for several years, it's basically a hockey stick on the unfunded liability, and the debt service on that is going to continue to go up. So they talk about a 20-year dilemma that the state is in, basically, that we're not going to see any rosy picture for 20 years until this current wave cycles out. Now, they've made some attempts to reduce the benefits, but I don't think significantly enough to impact the state's overall financial condition. So, and it does trickle down, like you say, to the towns, as again, we mentioned next year we're $300,000 less walking in based on what the state did. And, you know, and even for the current year, there was, like you said, the uncertainty of how late before they gave us final numbers. There was talk about doing a second round of tax bills. And that,
Since we didn't know what was going to happen.
And that would a lot of angst about that in town as well.
In the meantime, you know, our expenses are still rolling in.
Oh, exactly.
Like they don't change.
Exactly. So, you know, we fortunately, we were very conservative on our budget in the 17-18 year, and we got a little bit more than we had budgeted for, so that was a positive. Less than we had the year before, but a little bit more than we had budgeted, so we have a little bit of cushion. But, you know.
There was a worst case scenario out there.
Oh, there was.
That was a very bad scenario.
There was. I mean, it could have been.
We're talking about a cut of $5 million, I think, or something.
Yeah,
like that. On top
it was
of what
devastating.
Yeah.
It would have been devastating. And, you know, how do you manage that? Do you go back to every taxpayer, or do you start shutting down the town hall 3 days a week and closing libraries? I mean, what do you do to make up that kind of money? It could have gotten very ugly very fast, and fortunately it didn't happen.
Right. What are your, so you work long hours. What do you spend most of your time doing? I mean, the budget, we're in the budget season now.
Budget season right now, hot
So
and
then it's
heavy.
all about budget. And you're in contact with people from the state, I presume.
Yeah, the way the budget process typically works is each department will prepare their budget, and if they have a board or commission, whether it's police commission, fire commission, library board, rec commission, they'll come before the town manager and myself, and they'll present their budget. It's actually a very exciting time because it gives us the opportunity to meet all the departments, and they all have really good ideas. And if you had an unlimited pot of money, you could do some of these nice things you wanted to do. Unfortunately, reality sets in, and you really can't. You have to pick and choose which items you want to fund. But the process really is I find it very exciting. And then once all the departments have been met with, it's where we are now basically, we'll compile a budget, and it goes to the town council. Typically, they start the process. They'll have some bigger departments in during March: Public Works, Fire, Police, Library, Board of Ed, and Park and Recreation, to hear their budget proposals. They start the budget process truly starts that first Tuesday in April, when they have a council meeting, and then they have the public hearing where the folks will have an opportunity, the residents, to make comments. You know, we like this, we don't like that. You know, teeter with this, teeter with that, you know, and make their suggestions.
It's their chance to advocate for what they want to see.
Exactly. It's their one opportunity. After that, it's basically closed off to the public. So after that public hearing, again, which is the first Tuesday in April, there really is no opportunity for the public to have any input. So
Other than town council meetings.
That's true. That's true. But on the budget specifically, that's their prime time to get out there and let their voice be heard as to what they think is important or not important. And then after there's a series of meetings where the town council will deliberate, and they may make further cuts on top of what the town manager made. And then it goes to the voters, referendum the second Tuesday of May, and then the voters vote. They have three options. Yeah, we like it the way it is. No, we don't like it, it's too high. No, we don't like it, it's too low. And then they have the vote, and then there's a threshold to how many folks have to come out to vote, which we've never really met. Because it's basically an advisory vote, and a lot of people feel, why should I bother coming out even if we vote it down?
It doesn't have any teeth to it.
Exactly.
Right.
Where a lot of towns, a referendum vote is a referendum. You vote it down, it's down.
Right. And then town council's everybody's got to go through the whole process
Exactly.
again.
Exactly. Where in our case, it's just an advisory vote. So, and they were successful because if you turn back the time, probably, I don't know when this went in place, probably the early 2000s, you used to have the annual town meeting, and you had a card. And you in favor of the budget, you raised your card, and someone counted the votes, and that's how it was done. Well, the concern was if you were the police chief and someone made a vote, they wanted to cut money out of the police department.
The police chief is there saying, oh, really?
Right. And you raise your card next to the police chief, you're going to say,
remember that guy.
Exactly, exactly. It's people were not,
It's not anonymous.
It's not anonymous, and people were reluctant to do that. Plus, folks that worked on second shift were out of the process. So now they have, from noon to 8 on that second Tuesday of May. It gives folks the ability to get out. There was a concern also, sometimes elderly folks don't want to go out after dinner. Again, starting at noon gives them that opportunity to go out. So it's been successful in getting more folks involved in the budget process, the budget adoption process. So there are naysayers on both sides. There are some folks that say it's worthless, but the facts are, the numbers
And there's
are,
no process that's perfect.
no, exactly.
So let's say that the taxpayer is its own board or commission. So everybody has an opportunity to advocate for what they see
Correct.
they want to do in the next year.
Correct.
What would you say to recommend to taxpayers that want to be as informed as possible, what they can do to be as informed as possible? I know that we print out our budget books and
Right.
they're available at Town Hall.
Right.
A
It's online.
couple months before.
It's on the town website. I mean, come to meetings. And there's nothing more important, I think, than hearing things firsthand. You can
Okay.
read all the documentation you want, but when the police commission's making their pitch, be there to listen to what they're saying. Whether it's the police commission, fire commission, or the big departments, or even the small departments. As the town council is going through the budget, if they have a question with the social services department, they may ask Louisa for a question. So it's important to be there to hear the answers, hear the responses. You can get a lot by reading, but you can't get that dialogue and that dynamic back and forth.
And get a sense for where the ideas are coming from.
True.
And it should be also noted that a lot of these boards and commissions are volunteers.
Oh,
so these
definitely.
are people that are spending a lot of their time and effort going through these budgets.
It's a process.
It's
I mean,
a long
there are
process. It takes the whole year,
Exactly,
really.
exactly.
And that's where the ideas are formulated from. And,
Exactly.
And they're not always spending money. They're also interested in making things more efficient and effective for the town. I know that much.
Definitely, that's true.
Well, we could spend a lot more time talking about this, but why don't I give you a break and ask you to come back after the budget season is over with, and maybe we can see where we're at then.
Certainly.
And we can look at the year ahead.
That sounds like a plan.
Thank you all for joining me today for this edition of I Want to Know. Please email me at danarminnb@gmail.com with any questions or feedback you may have to offer. Please help sustain Tutucket TV, which serves our town in video, and please help sustain Tutucket Times, which serves our town in print. Thank you very much for joining me for another edition of I Want to Know.